All right,
Tua and the 5-6 Miami Dolphins are on a 3-game win streak, taking on Jordan Love and the 8-3 Green Bay Packers. And arguably the most intriguing Thanksgiving Day game, Miami looks to make a playoff push. Meanwhile, the Packers are trying to keep pace in a loaded division. The NFC North has been a powerhouse this season, with its teams combining for 31 wins, by far the most of any division in the league. It's also the only division with all 4 teams having a positive point differential. Stephen A., I'll come back to you on this one. Do you feel like the Packers are legit NFC contenders?
I think they are, because I think that if Jordan Love explodes, if he gets in a groove, they've shown us, particularly with their blowout win over the Cowboys in the postseason, they can make some noise. Their defense is not awful. They can get some stops. They can be competitive. Offensively, if you get him going, Josh Jacobs gets going, I think that you can't summarily dismiss the Packers. I don't have them winning. I have Detroit as the best team in the NFC. I have the Philadelphia Eagles as a close number 2. And I think anybody and everybody else, even the Minnesota Vikings, are a distant third. Minnesota not so distant, because I know their defense is elite. You just got to convince me that Sam Darnold is going to show up consistently, and that same Sam Darnold is going to show up in the playoffs as well. I got to see that to believe it. But in the end, I'm looking at it from the standpoint that when you take away the Eagles and the Lions, look at everybody else within the NFC. Who can't Green Bay beat? When they lost to Minnesota, they barely lost them. I think it was like 31-29, if I remember correctly. It was a pretty close game. We know that they're capable of putting up points. They can hurt you when Jordan Love is not on his game, but when he is on his game, they can be very formidable. And as a result of that, you can find yourself in some trouble. So I think based off of that reality, they're competitive, and being competitive, I would label them a legit contender in the NFC.
I think the game's a lot more about Miami, which we'll spend a minute or two on in a second. I totally disagree with Steve.
Really?
They lost to Philadelphia, and they lost 2 home games to Minnesota and Detroit. They were getting killed by Minnesota, and they got buried by the Lions. They're dangerous, but there's a difference between dangerous and contending. Could they win a game?
I like Jordan Love.
But he's up and down. He can throw that interception he threw against Detroit.
Yeah.
The finish last year against San Francisco. Steve's right about the order. Detroit, Philadelphia, and I think Minnesota should be upgraded a little higher. He's had a great year.
Yeah.
Darnold last week against the Bears in overtime, he was tremendous in the game. And they got a good running back, and he's a good coach.
Yes.
You know that.
Absolutely.
O'Connell's a good coach.
Yes, he is. He's very good. He's very good.
So I think Minnesota's a little cut below, but I like them to be a much better team down the road than Green Bay. Remember, too, Green Bay has to play at Minnesota and at Detroit in these last 5 or 6 games. They're going to get into the playoffs, but is Green Bay going to do what they did last year, win a game, and almost beat the Niners? I would be surprised.
All right, I'm gonna go here. I think they are definite contenders, and here's why. I think as you've watched the errors, like the game against Minnesota that you talked about, they were getting blown out. Love was just coming back off his injury, probably was a week early of what he should have, and he threw 3 I think it was 3 picks early. Then they come roaring back. They have a shot at it. They don't complete it. You're right about the Detroit game, right? But this is a team that you're watching LaFleur begin to manage his team, which I think he is an excellent football coach. Even last week against San Fran, you saw a ton of Josh Jacobs. I mean, they got physical. You see a little dump off to Kraft in the red zone. You're seeing LaFleur take the risk out of the game for Jordan Love, because he understands it's not the interceptions, y'all. I want you to understand this. It's the decision-making. It's a young quarterback whose top side is top of our league. But when he makes those throws, like backed up in the end zone, dumping off against the Rams, those kind of decisions, that's what the margin for error is so small for Green Bay. But here's the thing. They have a very good defense, better than people think. They've lived on turnovers. You can't live on turnovers. They're getting better without getting the turnovers. If you limit your own, you can be in every game, because they're physical, they're well coached, and they're not going to beat themselves. I'm just telling you, there's a lot of teams in the NFL that can't qualify and check those boxes. Well, they do, and that's why they're a contender.
I want to do a couple of things. Number one, everybody knows, I mean, Jeff Saturday, I've been critical of LaFleur in the past. I always call him LaFleur, Matt LaFleur, you know what I'm saying? Because it spelled like he's from France or something, like he's a Frenchman or whatever. But I want to take this moment to say, I think he's proven to be a hell of a coach.
Heck yeah.
I really do. When we see the slippage that has taken place from Aaron Rodgers, when we see what he's had to deal with when we see the elevation of Jordan Love, even though he's been sporadic at times, primarily due to injuries. And then you look at certain things that's going on. Look at their defense, doggy. They're ranked 10th in scoring, 11th in yards, tied for the league lead in turnovers forced per game this year. That's the Green Bay Packers defense. Offensively, 19th in the NFL in third down conversions. That's true. But 5th in total offense, 8th in scoring, 3rd in rushing, and 11th in passing. Collectively, when you look at a football team and you're wondering about leadership, you're not wondering about that with the Green Bay Packers.
Nope.
Matt LaFleur, and if I say LaFleur, I'm only having fun, and I'm not disrespecting him in any way, but the man has proven to be a damn good coach. And I think that it's important to recognize that. So now it really, really comes down to Jordan Love. Because when you see the personnel, you see that they got some pieces. And Josh Jacobs is the 3rd leading rusher in the National Football League. Okay, the brother can ball, and he's doing his thing. So I'm looking at Green Bay. I'm not picking them over Detroit. I'm not picking them over the Philadelphia Eagles. But you can't take them for granted. I don't think you can look at them and say that they're not a contender, because to say that they're not a contender, doggy, is to basically say they can't beat somebody, and we know they can.
Well, contender means win the NFC. They'd have to win in Philly and winning Detroit back-to-back weeks.
That's tough.
I can't see them doing that.
Can I get to Miami, guys?
Yeah.
And them keeping hope alive.
Let's do
So
it.
obviously winners of 3 straight. Do you feel like, Mad Dog, they could salvage their season if they go out and beat Green Bay tomorrow?
Well, let's do the math here first, Mal. You got Denver at 7-5, and you got the Chargers at 7-4. Those and Baltimore, Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So those are they got to catch the Broncos or the Chargers, and they play against each other.
That's right.
So but they got easy schedules, those two teams. So the Dolphins are going to have to get to 10 wins.
Okay.
They're 5-6. They have the Jets twice. They play at Houston. They have a wounded San Francisco team coming to Miami. Not impossible. But for me to believe in them, they got to win tomorrow night.
That's right.
And that's why this game tomorrow night, Stevie and Jeff, there's the schedule. Texans have been bad. The Browns, they should be able to beat maybe. But this is interesting about tomorrow night. First off, Tua 0-7 when it's 40 degrees below.
Ooh.
It's 23 degrees tomorrow night in Lambeau Field. That's number one. Number two, it's a short work week. I heard Joe Fontenot on radio today. Teams on Thanksgiving at home are 13-4.
Yes.
That's hard to win a road game on Thanksgiving. And Miami to Green Bay is not an hour flight.
Well,
that's right.
That's a long way. So if they win tomorrow, Stevie, I'll say, hey, you know what? Miami's in play. I'm going to have to see it first, Jeff, Steve.
Agreed.
Before I
That's
think the
fair
Dolphins
for
can
a
make-
multitude of reasons. It's a
Couple
good
of
litmus
things.
test.
Right.
Couple of things. I'm going to tell you this right now. After that, they could win the next 5 games, still end up with 10 wins on the season, even
They could, I
with a
guess.
loss
I
tomorrow
could.
night. But having said that, let me say this. I have long dogged the Miami Dolphins. I don't even look at their talent most of the time because I know they can't play in inclement weather. I mean, there's something that happens to you when you get to the South Beach weather. You get softened up. I mean, it's like putting lotion and lathering your body and all of this other stuff and just relaxing in the sunshine. I think that's what they do. And I think that when you go into cold conditions, they just seem to be a shell of themselves. And I expect nothing different come Thursday night. But I will say this. If you end up going up, if you're the Miami Dolphins and you win that game, it's going to say a lot to me about you because of what I just finished saying about Green Bay. But I got to tell you, they need to win these other games, and they need to win a game in inclement weather for us to take them seriously.
Good point.
If you can't win a
100%.
game in 40-degree weather or below, I'm not taking you seriously.
Right.
I'm just not.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think it for this reason. You think about whether you got to go to Baltimore, whether you got to go to Pittsburgh, whether you got to go to Buffalo. Yeah, everywhere you're going in AFC, you're going to go somewhere cold, right? So you're going to have to show.
Kansas City was 4 degrees.
Kansas City, the Texans would be the only place that you could slide in for a warm weather game or whatever. But when you think about the Miami Dolphins, tomorrow's game to me is a physicality test. Can you line up against a Green Bay Packer team that you just, or whoever just read off their stats of where they are offensively? They can run the ball, they can throw the ball. They want to be physical on both sides of the line of scrimmage. They don't want it ain't gonna be a pat and go. This is gonna be I'm gonna hit you all day in cold weather. That to me is what's gonna show for the Miami Dolphins. Because to get on these runs, they've won 3 in a row. You got to put some more together, right? 3 fairly easy ones. Now it's a real time. Now we're getting to playoff teams on the road. These are the ones. Because you get into the cupcakes, right? You get into your own division. It's like, none of these teams, like you said, the 5, they could win the final 5. These games are what mark you as a team. It's these games that no one thinks you can win. Going into their house under 40 degrees, go get a win. Now you put yourself in a true conversation.
Well, they've heard it all week now. I'll ask you as a player. They can't win in cold weather, can't beat a good team,
That's
short
right.
work week on the road. You'd think that might help them.
Yes.
Let's shut everybody up. Is that a factor here, Monet?
100%. Every conversation that McDaniel has had with this team has started with, it's us versus the world. No one believes in us except the guys in this room. The 53 and this staff, everybody else picks against us. Nobody thinks we can do it. Let's go shock the world. That's his rallying cry.
Well, most teams say that, number one, so I'm not going to give him a cookie for that. Number two, I will say this. They've gotten into the short and intermediate passing game to get the ball out of Tua Tagovailoa's hands, quicker, and that has worked to their advantage, and props to them for doing so. But teams are figuring that out because they know, how fragile he can be because of all of those damn concussions that he's suffered from and what we fear he will suffer from, okay? And by the way, the colder the weather is, the harder that turf is. So all of a sudden, you know that better than any of us, Jeff.
Yeah.
Here today,
No doubt.
the fact is you hit that ground, it's gonna be a little harder. And so I take all of that in consideration as I'm watching. Tomorrow's game is so important. What did you say the weather conditions was going to be, Doggy?
29.
What's the weather conditions supposed to be?
23.
Oh my God!
And feels like 15. Feels like 15.
If the Dolphins win that game tomorrow night, forget the record. It's going to say a lot to us about what they're capable of if you perform in that weather.
Yes.
It really comes down to that.
Yeah, this is a fascinating game. This is by far the best game out of the three
No
tomorrow.
doubt.
By far the best
Oh,
game.
not even close.
And I tell you, NBC got a break because Miami, as you said, has won 3 in a row. If they were 4-8, it'd be a lousy football day.
Yeah.
I'd have to actually talk to my wife.
No.
Anyway,
Do
now
you
I can
hear
think
him?
of the game.
Would you?
I'm rough.
You watch.
Listen,
You watch your mouth.
This is why I know he's a hater. He talks about his wife who dresses him and
Literally.
takes little shots like
And puts
that.
up with him all
Yeah.
these years.
all
How
the
many
ti-
years?
29.
Yeah.
29.
She's a saint. Bless her
she is
soul.
a saint. She's earned crowns in heaven.
Yeah.
Massive
He's taking
crowns.
He's taking
Massive.
shots at his own mother. I mean, Doggy's pathetic.
And
pathetic.
and his son, he was out there. His son they got boat raced, and he was like, "Why did I come out to Palo Alto?"
They got very points. I was annoyed. Anyway,
You're
you may continue. I'm tough.
a
I'm tough.
savage. You are tough.